I now recognize Representative Sara Jacobs of California, who's the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on International Development, International Organizations, and Global Corporate Social Impact for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here with us today. I first want to thank you and the Biden administration for your announcement of the Global Fragility Act countries. I'm looking forward to its implementation, particularly in Mozambique and coastal West Africa, and I hope we can continue to work together on that. I also know that a lot of us will be asking you questions about Ukraine, and it's our job to do oversight, but I think it's first important to say that you and the Biden administration and President Biden have been masterful in how you all have handled this crisis, making sure our allies are and remain united, making sure that our approach is strategic and thoughtful, and weighing all the different calculations, including the risk of escalation. And I just want to say that I go to sleep feeling better every night because I know that President Biden and you all are leading the way here on this. One of the things I know we're all concerned about, and I'm sure you saw on your trip to Kyiv, is this question of war crimes and atrocities. And it's increasingly important that the international community comes together to hold Putin accountable. Thankfully, the ICC has announced an investigation in Ukraine, which I'm very supportive of, and I understand the Biden administration is currently undergoing a policy review of the ICC and whether to provide material support to this investigation. So, Mr. Secretary, does the Biden administration support the ICC's investigation in Ukraine?
We do, and let me add very quickly that we welcome it. We're looking to see how we can support it. There are other critically important efforts at accountability for these war crimes and other atrocities that have been committed that we're also supporting. The Ukrainian Prosecutor General, she's leading a major effort to do this, to document, to collect the evidence, to prepare prosecutions. We have our own experts working directly with her and her team. Second, because we got back on the Human Rights Council at the United Nations, we were able to lead the effort to establish a commission of inquiry at the Human Rights Council to do the same thing. We're also supporting that. So along with the ICC, the Prosecutor General, the Human Rights Council, some other investigations that are going forward, across the board, they will have our support.
That's really great to hear, and I think it's important that we support all of them. In terms of the ICC, we know that there are certain laws on the books that seem to prohibit material support and funding. Is that correct?
There are laws on the books, but we found ways in the past, and we're not a state party to the ICC. We do not intend to become one, but we have found ways in the past to support investigations. In fact, there's a prosecution going on right now of a Janjaweed from Darfur that is in part the result of information and support that we provided.
Okay, would it be helpful for Congress to waive some of these prohibitions for the purpose of an ICC investigation for Ukraine?
To the extent that we find that anything would be blocking useful support that we could provide, that's something we should look at, yes.
Okay, great. Well, I look forward to working with you on that, and I think you'll find a lot of support here in Congress to make sure we're doing everything we can to hold Putin accountable. I want to go to another part of the world. The last 2 years have been particularly deadly across the Sahel, with attacks claiming more than 3,200 victims in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and an alarming trend of coups, many of which were carried out by U.S.-trained personnel. And this is despite U.S. and international investments, the vast majority in the form of security assistance in the region for roughly a decade. And that's why I, along with my colleagues, including Chairman Meek, sent a letter to President Biden urging a new strategy for the Sahel. And as part of this letter, we requested an evaluation of security assistance and other efforts in the Sahel over the last 15 years. Does the department have the adequate resources necessary to carry out such a review?
Thank you for putting a flag on that, because I do think this is very important, and I share your concerns. We've seen mounting instability. We've seen the coups that you've alluded to in Mali and Guinea and Burkina Faso. And I think we have strongly felt the need for what you've suggested and others have suggested is a more comprehensive strategy to approach this. And that's exactly what we put in place. And so, yes, security is obviously a critical component, but while it's necessary, it's insufficient. Getting at the drivers of conflict, getting at the lack of effective institutions, public services, the lack of inclusion for minorities and the marginalized, human rights abuses, other drivers. The strategy covers all of that, and it also makes sure that as we're moving forward, we are looking hard at the programs that we have in place to make sure that they are effective, they're operating as they're designed to be. I believe we have the resources necessary in the budget to carry out that mission.
That's great to hear. I know in June 2020, the state OIG report on the CT Bureau was concerned that it would take 7 years to fully comply with the department's monitoring and evaluation standards. So I would love to work with you to make sure that we are giving you the resources that you need to be able to do this, and that we are learning the lessons that we need to from these investments and actually reform our approach so that we are promoting our values and not only looking at short-term security, but our long-term priorities as well. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize